Michael Jordan overhears a boy say he's not black enough to play ball. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan's story didn't begin on an NBA court, nor did it begin with the fame and recognition he would eventually achieve. It began in the quiet streets of Wilmington, North Carolina, where a young boy was growing up surrounded by the love of his family and the pressure to succeed. From the beginning, Michael was driven by something more than just a love of basketball. He was driven by the desire to prove that he was capable of achieving greatness, regardless of the obstacles that might stand in his way. Growing up in Wilmington, Michael had a close-knit family. His father, James Jordan Sr., was his greatest influence. James wasn't just a father, he was a mentor, a coach, and a guide. He taught Michael the value of hard work, discipline, and perseverance, traits that would later define his legendary career. His mother, Dolores, was equally influential, instilling in him the importance of education, respect, and humility. Together, they created a foundation of love and support that shaped the person Michael would become. Despite the support of his family, Michael's early years weren't free of struggles. As a young athlete, he was far from a guaranteed star. Michael had an older brother, Larry, who was talented in his own right, and much of their early competition was friendly but intense. The sibling rivalry between the two pushed Michael to work harder, always striving to surpass his brother's achievements. This competitive spirit became part of who Michael was, always driven, always looking for ways to improve, and always unwilling to accept mediocrity. Basketball wasn't initially Michael's only focus. He was a talented multi-sport athlete, excelling in baseball and football. But it was basketball where he found his true calling. Even as a young player, Michael's natural athleticism was evident. He had a smoothness to his game, an elegance when he moved across the court, and a competitive edge that set him apart. But as with most legends, his journey wasn't without its challenges. One of the first setbacks Michael faced in his basketball career came in high school. As a sophomore at Laney High School, he tried out for the varsity basketball team with great anticipation. He had already proven himself in junior varsity games, but the coach saw something different. Michael wasn't selected for the varsity team. The disappointment was crushing. For a young man who had worked so hard and had such big dreams, this failure stung deeply. But rather than accepting defeat, Michael used this rejection as fuel for his fire. His father's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that no setback should define who he was. If he wanted to succeed, he would have to work harder than ever. Determined to prove himself, Michael spent the next year honing his skills with relentless focus. He would spend countless hours practicing his shots, working on his footwork, and studying the game. When he returned to try out for the varsity team as a junior, it was a different story. Not only did he make the team, but he became the star player. Michael's transformation from an overlooked sophomore to an unstoppable force on the court was nothing short of remarkable. It was a testament to his character and his unwillingness to accept failure. But this moment of triumph wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Throughout high school, Michael continued to elevate his game, and by the time he was a senior, he was a consensus top player in the country. His combination of size, speed, and skill made him a matchup nightmare for any opponent. College recruiters began flocking to Laney High, eager to sign him to a scholarship. But Michael, ever focused, kept his eyes on the bigger picture, getting to the NBA. The recruitment process was intense, but one school stood out to Michael. He chose the University of North Carolina, led by legendary coach Dean Smith. Michael's decision to attend UNC wasn't just about basketball, it was about finding the right place to continue his growth as both a player and a person. UNC offered the perfect balance of competition, coaching, and education. It would also be the place where Michael would truly begin to establish himself as one of the best basketball players in the country. At UNC, Jordan's game continued to develop. Coach Smith's emphasis on teamwork and discipline helped Michael refine his skills and broaden his basketball IQ. Though Michael's talent was evident, his time at UNC was about more than just showcasing his individual skills, it was about learning how to be part of a system. For the first time, Michael was playing alongside other future NBA stars, including James Worthy and Sam Perkins. The competition was fierce, but it forced Michael to become a more complete player. During his freshman year, Jordan's breakthrough moment came in the 1982 NCAA championship game. With less than 20 seconds left, the game tied, and UNC in need of a hero, Michael calmly stepped up and hit the game-winning shot. This clutch performance was a glimpse of the mental toughness that would become a hallmark of Jordan's career. The shot not only secured the championship for UNC but also made Jordan a household name. It was the first of many defining moments in his career, and it signaled the beginning of his journey to NBA stardom. By his sophomore year, Jordan had firmly established himself as one of the top players in college basketball. He was more than just a scorer, he was a leader on the court, someone who could control the game in ways that few players his age could. But despite his success, Michael never stopped working. He knew that the NBA was the next step, and he began to prepare for that challenge. Jordan's growth at UNC was not just about basketball, it was about maturity. It was about learning to balance the pressures of being a star with the demands of being a part of a team. His ability to handle those pressures would prove essential when he made the leap to the NBA. After 2 seasons at UNC, Michael made the decision to declare for the 1984 NBA draft. While his time at college had prepared him for the rigors of professional basketball, Jordan was about to enter a world that would demand everything from him. The draft was a pivotal moment in his life, one that would mark the beginning of a new chapter. His talent was undeniable, but the real test would be how he handled the expectations that came with being the top pick. When the Chicago Bulls selected Michael Jordan with the 3rd overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft, the stage was set for him to become one of the most transformative figures in basketball history. But Jordan's arrival in Chicago wasn't the end of his story, it was just the beginning. The challenges he faced in the coming years, the triumphs, and the heartbreaks, would all become part of the journey that made Michael Jordan the icon he is today. Jordan's early years with the Bulls were a mixture of struggles and small victories. He was a star, but the team around him was far from championship caliber. The NBA, however, was a league of fierce competition, and Jordan would quickly learn that individual brilliance wasn't enough. To win a championship, he would need to bring more to the table, he would need to be a leader in every sense of the word. But the foundation for greatness had already been laid. Michael Jordan had already shown the world what he was capable of, and there was no turning back now. The next chapter would be the one that would propel him to NBA superstardom, but first, he would face the tough lessons that would ultimately lead him to the pinnacle of his career. The journey that began in the streets of Wilmington, North Carolina, was far from over. It was just beginning to unfold. Michael Jordan's arrival in the NBA was nothing short of a spectacle. The 1984 NBA draft saw the Chicago Bulls select Jordan with the 3rd overall pick, but the excitement surrounding him was larger than just any ordinary rookie. Jordan was already a household name after his success at the University of North Carolina, and the basketball world was eager to see if he could make the transition to the professional game. His rookie season with the Bulls would set the tone for everything to come, but it wasn't as easy as many had imagined. Despite the incredible hype surrounding his arrival, Jordan's early days in the league would prove to be as much about growing into a leader as it was about showcasing his individual brilliance. At first, Michael Jordan was the sole bright spot on a struggling Bulls team. Chicago was far from a contender, and it would be a few years before the pieces around Jordan began to fall into place. But his raw talent and undeniable drive were apparent from day one. Jordan immediately took control of the scoring load for the Bulls, averaging an impressive 28.2 points per game as a rookie. He was electric on the court, able to attack the basket with an athleticism that seemed beyond compare. His jump shot, though not as polished as it would become, was deadly enough to make defenders second-guess their every move. It wasn't just his scoring that set him apart. Jordan's ability to elevate the game of those around him began to take shape early on. However, there were clear challenges. Despite Jordan's incredible individual performance, the Bulls were still very much a work in progress. They struggled to build around Jordan, and his rookie year was full of frustration as the team failed to make a significant playoff push. Chicago finished the season with a 38-44 record, a far cry from the level of success Jordan would eventually bring to the franchise. Jordan's brilliance was undeniable, but he was constantly playing with a team that could not match his intensity. In fact, the lack of a solid supporting cast was one of the biggest struggles in those early years. At this stage of his career, Jordan was faced with the reality that being a great player wasn't enough. He could score at will, but the Bulls weren't winning, and he wasn't a leader in the way that legends like Magic Johnson or Larry Bird were. His individual brilliance was shining, but he needed more than that to elevate his team to greatness. Over time, this realization started to take shape. Jordan was learning the hard lesson that championship teams weren't built around one player alone. He needed the right pieces, but he also needed to develop into a player who could lead in all aspects, not just through his scoring but through his leadership and ability to elevate everyone around him. The pivotal moment in Jordan's development as a leader came in the 1986-87 season. In the previous years, the focus had been on Jordan's raw potential, but now the pressure was mounting for him to become more than just a talented individual scorer. During the 1986-87 season, Jordan took his game to a new level, averaging 37.1 points per game and leading the league in scoring. His offensive prowess was unmatched, and his scoring was the primary reason the Bulls were even in playoff contention. However, the team was still not on par with the league's elite. Jordan needed to develop a stronger relationship with his teammates and embrace the concept of building a team around him. Jordan's incredible scoring ability put him in a league of his own, but as he approached his first taste of playoff basketball, it became clear that his game still needed refinement. In his first postseason appearance in 1985-86, the Bulls were swept by the Boston Celtics, one of the most dominant teams in NBA history. Despite Jordan's heroic efforts, including his unforgettable 63-point performance in Game 2 of the series, the Bulls were no match for the Celtics' balanced and championship-ready roster. Jordan's individual brilliance was on full display, but it wasn't enough to take down the Celtics. The series ended with the Celtics sweeping the Bulls, but Jordan's performance in the loss proved his ability to rise to the occasion. The experience of losing to the Celtics proved invaluable to Jordan. He realized that being an individual scorer wasn't enough to get past the top teams in the league. The Celtics' balance and teamwork showed him what a true championship team looked like. Jordan began to embrace the idea of making those around him better, and over the next few seasons, he worked tirelessly on not just his scoring, but his passing, his leadership, and his overall basketball IQ. As Jordan entered his third season with the Bulls, his evolution as a player continued. He was no longer just focused on scoring, he was becoming a more well-rounded player, learning how to operate within a team structure. The Bulls' roster began to improve as well, with players like Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, and John Paxson being added to the mix. Pippen, in particular, began to emerge as an essential part of the Bulls' future. Jordan no longer had to do it all on his own. With a stronger supporting cast, the Bulls started to look like a team capable of competing at the highest level. Pippen's development alongside Jordan was vital. The two players complemented each other perfectly. While Jordan could dominate offensively, Pippen brought a well-rounded game, excelling on both ends of the court. Their combination was the foundation of what would soon become the most dominant duo in NBA history. With Pippen's defensive ability, passing skills, and versatility, Jordan was able to focus on his scoring while trusting that Pippen could carry some of the load. The 1989-1990 season marked a turning point for Jordan and the Bulls. The team made it to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in the Jordan era, where they faced the Detroit Pistons, a team known for their physicality and aggressive defense. The Pistons, led by Isaiah Thomas and their bad boys mentality, had been the dominant force in the East for years. The series between the Bulls and the Pistons was a brutal test for Jordan, as the Pistons relentlessly targeted him with their hard fouls and stifling defense. The series stretched to 7 games, with the Pistons eventually defeating the Bulls, but Jordan had shown incredible growth. He had taken his game to a level where he could challenge the best, even if his team wasn't quite ready to dethrone the Pistons. The loss to the Pistons was a painful one, but it was a learning experience. Jordan knew that the Bulls needed to become tougher, more resilient, and better equipped to handle the physical style of play that the Pistons had perfected. He had reached a point where individual talent wasn't enough. He needed to become a leader who could bring the team together and help them reach a new level. The lessons he learned from battling the Pistons were crucial, and they became the blueprint for the years to come. Jordan's determination to not only be the best scorer but also the best leader would define the rest of his career. The next few years would see the Bulls rise from playoff contenders to champions, but the seeds for that success had been sown during this challenging period. Jordan had learned that greatness wasn't just about individual accolades, it was about finding a way to lift your team and lead them to victory. As the 1990s approached, Jordan was ready to embrace the leadership role that would guide the Chicago Bulls to a dynasty. The work he had put in during these early years had prepared him for everything that lay ahead. Jordan was about to take the next step in his evolution. He wasn't just going to be the best player on the court, he was going to be the player who made everyone else better. The next chapter was where Jordan would begin to truly reshape the NBA and build the legacy that would make him the greatest player the game had ever seen. But first, the team would have to evolve, and Jordan would have to push them to heights no one had ever thought possible. By the 1990-91 season, Michael Jordan's evolution as a player had reached a critical point. After spending years being recognized for his individual brilliance, he now understood that the true test of greatness lay in winning championships, not just accumulating individual accolades. The 1990-91 season would mark the beginning of the Chicago Bulls dynasty and Jordan's true legacy as a leader. The team around Jordan had begun to change. Scottie Pippen, who had grown into one of the NBA's most dynamic and versatile players, was now firmly established as Jordan's co-star. While Jordan had carried the team for years, Pippen was now more than just a complimentary player. He was a crucial part of the Bulls' success. His defense, playmaking, and scoring ability allowed Jordan to focus on what he did best, taking over games when the team needed him most. Alongside Pippen, the Bulls' roster was filled with players who fit the mold of a championship team. Horace Grant provided a powerful presence in the paint, both offensively and defensively. B.J. Armstrong and John Paxson were solid guards who could hit key shots, and Bill Cartwright, the seasoned center, brought veteran leadership. The team wasn't just a collection of individuals, it was a cohesive unit that played together with purpose. But there was still one challenge that the Bulls had to overcome: the Detroit Pistons. The Bad Boys had ruled the Eastern Conference for years, using physical, aggressive play to neutralize their opponents, particularly Jordan. The Pistons had become the team that Jordan and the Bulls couldn't seem to get past, even though they had pushed them to the brink in previous seasons. To truly reach their potential, the Bulls had to conquer the Pistons and end their reign of terror in the East. The 1990-91 Eastern Conference Finals would provide that opportunity. The Bulls were ready to face the Pistons once again, but this time, something was different. Jordan had grown as a player. He was no longer just relying on his scoring. He had become a more complete player, using his leadership to inspire his teammates and get the best out of them. The mental toughness he had developed from years of battling the Pistons had sharpened his game. He knew that beating Detroit would require more than just individual brilliance. It would require the Bulls to be united, to trust each other, and to play as one. The series was hard-fought, but the Bulls quickly proved that they were ready. They defeated the Pistons in a clean 4-0 sweep, a statement that they had moved past their biggest obstacle. The image of the Pistons walking off the court without shaking hands after their defeat became one of the defining moments of that series. It wasn't just that the Bulls had beaten the Pistons, they had outgrown them, proving that the future of the NBA was in their hands. With the Pistons out of the way, the Chicago Bulls advanced to the NBA Finals for the first time in franchise history. Their opponent, the Los Angeles Lakers, were the defending champions and led by Magic Johnson, one of the greatest players the game had ever seen. The Lakers were a dynasty of their own, and the finals were set to be an epic clash between two generations of basketball greatness. For Jordan, this was the moment he had been waiting for. He had finally reached the summit, but now he had to prove that he was capable of leading his team to victory on the grandest stage. The 1991 NBA Finals were intense, with the Lakers hoping to defend their championship. But Jordan's brilliance was undeniable. He averaged 31.2 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 11.4 assists per game in the series. His playmaking ability, which had evolved over the years, was now as much a part of his game as his scoring. He was no longer just a scorer, he was orchestrating the offense, getting his teammates involved, and proving that he could do whatever it took to win. Jordan's dominance was on full display in Game 2 of the Finals. With the Bulls up by 1 point in the closing seconds, Jordan found himself at the free throw line. With ice in his veins, he made 2 crucial free throws to seal the win for the Bulls. But it wasn't just his scoring, it was his poise under pressure that left a lasting impression. In Game 3, the Lakers were hoping to bounce back, but Jordan continued to put on a show. His combination of skill, athleticism, and leadership proved too much for the Lakers to handle. The Bulls took a 3-0 lead in the series, and the Lakers, despite their championship pedigree, were looking down the barrel of a final sweep. The Lakers fought hard, but by Game 5, the Bulls had secured their first-ever NBA championship, winning 108-105 to clinch the series 4-1. Jordan was named Finals MVP, and his performance was the crowning achievement of his career to that point. He had led the Bulls to the pinnacle of the NBA, and the victory marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Jordan had arrived, not just as a superstar, but as the leader of an NBA dynasty. The 1991 championship was not just about winning the first title for the Bulls, it was about Michael Jordan proving that he was capable of leading his team to greatness. This was the moment that solidified his legacy as not just a great individual player, but as a champion. The Bulls were now a force to be reckoned with, and Jordan's impact was undeniable. His ability to take over a game, to lead his teammates, and to perform under pressure was a hallmark of his career, and it was what made him one of the greatest players the game had ever seen. But even as the champagne was being sprayed and the Bulls celebrated their first championship, Jordan knew that this was only the beginning. His hunger for success had not diminished. This title was the first step in what would become a dynasty, one that would redefine the NBA and leave an indelible mark on the sport. As the 1991-92 season unfolded, the Chicago Bulls were no longer just a team with a star player, they were a championship team with a strong supporting cast, a great coach in Phil Jackson, and a collective sense of purpose. Jordan was determined to lead the Bulls to more titles, and he knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger legacy. His competitive drive, his leadership, and his ability to elevate his teammates were all on display as the Bulls set their sights on their second consecutive title. The 1991-92 season saw the Bulls continue their dominance, finishing with a 67-15 record. They were a well-oiled machine, with Jordan at the helm, Pippen as his right-hand man, and a supporting cast that could fill in the gaps. The Bulls were once again a juggernaut, and the championship they had won in 1991 wasn't just a one-off, it was a statement that they were here to stay. The rise of the Bulls was, in many ways, a reflection of Jordan's growth as a player and a leader. He had gone from a young, individualistic scorer to the leader of a championship-caliber team. The lessons he had learned in the years leading up to this moment had shaped him into the player he was, and those lessons would continue to guide him as the Bulls began their run of dominance throughout the 1990s. As the 1992 NBA Finals loomed, Jordan knew that the road to another title would be difficult. The Portland Trail Blazers, led by Clyde Drexler, were an elite team in their own right. But Jordan, ever the competitor, was determined to prove that his Bulls were the best. The 1992 Finals, like the one before, would be another stage for Jordan to cement his legacy, and the world was watching. The 1991-92 season had been a triumph for Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, but as they entered the 1992-93 season, it was clear that they would be facing new challenges. Coming off their first back-to-back NBA championships, the pressure to maintain that success was immense. For Jordan, the weight of expectation was even heavier. The world expected more from him, and he was determined not to disappoint. But there was something else driving him that season, a fire that had grown even stronger. After winning his second consecutive MVP award in 1992, Jordan continued to prove that he was in a class of his own. He was the NBA's most dominant force, and the Bulls, as a team, were now considered the league's best. But as the regular season wore on, Jordan's intensity began to take a toll on him. Basketball had become more than just a game for him, it was his life. The pressures of being the best were starting to weigh heavily on his shoulders. He was already a champion, and yet, there was something within him that demanded more. He wanted to prove that he was capable of maintaining his level of dominance year after year. But this desire was beginning to consume him. The 1992-93 season also marked a turning point for Jordan in his personal life. Despite the external success and the championships, Michael was struggling with the loss of his father, James Jordan Sr., who had been tragically murdered in July 1993. The death of his father would have an immeasurable impact on Jordan, not just emotionally, but in the way he approached his game. James Jordan had always been his greatest supporter, his mentor, and his sounding board. His sudden death left a hole in Jordan's heart that no basketball game could fill. His grief, coupled with the mounting pressures of being the greatest player in the world, began to create an internal conflict that would change the trajectory of his career. As the season progressed, Jordan's focus began to waver. The toll of his father's death and the relentless pressure of being Michael Jordan weighed heavily on him. Basketball was no longer just a game, it was a reminder of everything he had lost. He began to feel the emotional weight of being the public figure that everyone wanted him to be. His father had always been there to support him, but now, in his absence, Jordan was forced to shoulder the burden alone. Despite the challenges, the Chicago Bulls were as strong as ever. With Jordan leading the way, the Bulls continued their dominance in the NBA. They finished the regular season with a 57-25 record, securing the top seed in the Eastern Conference. Jordan's scoring ability, combined with his leadership and his unrelenting drive, kept the Bulls at the top of the league. But as the team advanced to the playoffs, Jordan was beginning to realize that something needed to change. The pressure was too much, and he needed a break. The 1993 playoffs were once again a showcase for Jordan's brilliance. In the first round, the Bulls faced the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Jordan's legendary performance in Game 5 became one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. With the Bulls trailing by 1 point and just a few seconds left on the clock, Jordan took the ball, dribbled to the foul line, and hit a jumper over Craig Ello to win the game and clinch the series. This moment would forever be known as the shot, and it was a testament to Jordan's ability to perform when it mattered most. Despite the dramatic victory, Jordan was exhausted. The mental and emotional toll of the season had taken its toll, and by the time the Bulls reached the Eastern Conference Finals, Jordan was feeling the strain. They would face the New York Knicks, a team that was built to challenge the Bulls both physically and mentally. The Knicks were a tough, gritty team, and their defensive approach was designed to slow down Jordan and neutralize the Bulls' offense. In the series, Jordan found himself battling more than just the Knicks. He was battling his own emotions and doubts. As the series went on, it became clear that the Bulls weren't the same unstoppable force they had been in previous years. The Knicks' physical defense was wearing them down, and Jordan, despite his best efforts, couldn't carry the load alone. The series went to Game 7, a true test of character for both Jordan and the Bulls. But in the end, Jordan's willpower and leadership prevailed. The Bulls defeated the Knicks and advanced to the NBA Finals for the third consecutive year. The 1993 NBA Finals would prove to be a defining moment for Michael Jordan. The Bulls would face the Phoenix Suns, led by the dynamic duo of Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson. The Suns were a high-scoring team, and many believed that their fast-paced offense would challenge the Bulls' defense. The series was a back-and-forth affair, with both teams exchanging punches. But once again, Jordan rose to the occasion. In Game 4, with the series tied 2-2, Jordan delivered a performance that solidified his status as the greatest player in the world. He scored 55 points, leading the Bulls to a 111-105 victory and putting them one step closer to their third championship. Jordan's offensive game was at its peak, and he demonstrated his incredible ability to score from anywhere on the floor, whether it was hitting three-pointers, attacking the basket, or draining mid-range jumpers. The Suns, despite their best efforts, couldn't stop him. The Bulls would go on to win the 1993 NBA Finals, clinching their third consecutive championship. Jordan was named Finals MVP for the third year in a row, cementing his place as the most dominant player of the era. But as the celebrations began and the confetti fell on the floor of the arena, Jordan knew that this was a moment of transition. He had achieved everything he had set out to accomplish, and yet, the toll of his success was weighing on him. The pressure of maintaining this level of excellence year after year had begun to take a significant emotional toll on him. A few months after the championship win, Jordan shocked the world by announcing his first retirement from basketball. The decision came as a surprise to many, especially after achieving so much in such a short time. But for Jordan, the decision was personal. He had accomplished everything he had set out to do in basketball, and after the death of his father, he realized that he needed a break. Basketball no longer brought him the joy it once had. The pressures of being the greatest player in the world were no longer manageable, and Jordan walked away from the game. His retirement marked the end of an era for the Chicago Bulls. They had won 3 consecutive championships, but Jordan had burned out. The game he had once loved now felt like a burden. For Jordan, the game of basketball had always been an escape, a way to channel his emotions and his grief, but after the loss of his father, it became too much to bear. At the time, no one could have known what would happen next. Jordan's decision to leave the game was a shock, but it would set the stage for his eventual return. What Jordan didn't know at the time was that his first retirement would spark a series of events that would lead to the greatest comeback the sport had ever seen. But for now, Michael Jordan was stepping away from the game. The fire that had once burned so brightly had finally been extinguished, and the world was left wondering if he would ever return to the game that had made him a legend. Michael Jordan's retirement in 1993 stunned the basketball world. Having won 3 consecutive NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls, with 3 Finals MVPs to his name, and coming off a season where he had once again been named the league's most valuable player, Jordan's decision to walk away from the game was a shocking one. Yet, despite his incredible success, Jordan felt a profound sense of loss following the tragic murder of his father, James Jordan Sr., in the summer of 1993. His father had been his greatest mentor, the person who had always been there to guide him through every step of his basketball journey. The impact of losing him was devastating, and for Jordan, basketball no longer seemed as meaningful as it once had. In the wake of his father's death, Jordan took a hiatus from the game, deciding to pursue a career in baseball, his father's favorite sport. His sudden decision to switch sports surprised many, but for Jordan, baseball offered a way to cope with his grief and get away from the limelight that had surrounded him for so long. After signing a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox, Jordan played for the Birmingham Barons, a Double-A affiliate, and while his performance was far from remarkable, the decision provided him with something more important, a sense of peace. Despite his struggles in baseball, Jordan's time away from basketball gave him the space he needed to heal, both physically and emotionally. However, basketball was never far from his mind. In 1994, after a year away from the game, Jordan made a decision that would change the NBA landscape once again. He would return to the Chicago Bulls. His announcement, made in a simple statement, "I'm back," set the basketball world on fire. Jordan's return to the game wasn't just about his love for basketball, it was about reclaiming the one thing that had always given him purpose. The timing of his return was perfect. The Bulls, though still competitive, had not been able to replicate the dominance they had shown during Jordan's reign. The 1994-95 season had been difficult for the Bulls, who, despite the impressive play of Scottie Pippen, struggled to maintain the same chemistry and cohesion that had led them to 3 championships. Jordan's return was just the spark the team needed. The message was clear: the Bulls were ready to return to championship contention, and Michael Jordan was going to lead them. Jordan's re-entry into the league came at a time when the NBA was starting to evolve. The 1990s were marked by the rise of young stars, including Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway, and David Robinson, and the competition in the league was fierce. The game had changed since Jordan had left. Players were faster, more athletic, and the overall level of competition had grown. Despite being 32 years old and a year removed from competitive basketball, Jordan wasted no time proving that he was still one of the league's best players. The Chicago Bulls were a different team from the one Jordan had left. While Pippen was still at the forefront of the team, others like Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr, and Luke Longley had joined the roster, adding depth to the team. But even with these new pieces in place, Jordan's return marked a dramatic shift. His mere presence on the court changed the dynamics of the team. He wasn't just the best player, he was the leader, and his ability to elevate everyone around him was immediately apparent. The Bulls began to play with a renewed sense of purpose, and Jordan's leadership helped to bring the team back to its championship pedigree. Jordan's first game back in a Bulls uniform was on March 19, 1995, against the Indiana Pacers. The United Center was packed, the crowd on edge with anticipation, as Jordan stepped back onto the court for the first time in nearly 2 years. The game itself wasn't perfect. Jordan scored 19 points, but his performance showed signs of rust, and the Bulls lost to the Pacers. But it didn't matter. The important thing was that Jordan had returned. His fire was still there. His will to win was undiminished. The following week saw Jordan work through the rust that had accumulated during his time away. His scoring, which had always been his greatest strength, was a bit off, but the rest of his game was as sharp as ever. His basketball IQ, leadership, and competitive drive were unmistakable. Even when his shots weren't falling, his ability to make others better was evident. His return wasn't just about getting back into game shape, it was about finding his rhythm within the team again. And, of course, as time went on, he did. In the playoffs, the Chicago Bulls once again found themselves in familiar territory, at the top of the Eastern Conference. The 1995 NBA playoffs saw the Bulls face off against the Charlotte Hornets in the first round, and Jordan's presence was immediately felt. Despite not being in peak form, his leadership and sheer will to win lifted the team. The Bulls swept the Hornets, and Jordan's performance in the series, though not as dominant as in years past, was still enough to guide the team to a commanding victory. The Eastern Conference semifinals would see the Bulls match up against a tougher opponent, the Orlando Magic. The Magic, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway, had made waves in the NBA, and many believed they could challenge the Bulls. The series was a hard-fought battle, but despite Jordan's best efforts, the Bulls were eliminated by the Magic in a shocking 4-2 series loss. The defeat was a bitter pill to swallow. It wasn't just that the Bulls had lost, it was that Jordan, despite his return, had not been able to lead his team past the Magic. However, the loss was a wake-up call for both Jordan and the Bulls. It highlighted that even with his return, the team was still learning how to function as a unit again. It was a reminder that championships weren't just about individual greatness, they were about teamwork, chemistry, and trust. And so, in the offseason, Jordan, Pippen, and the rest of the team began to work even harder, knowing that they would have to return stronger and more unified if they wanted to reclaim their place at the top. Jordan's first postseason after his return was a moment of reflection. He realized that his desire to dominate was still there, but it had to be tempered with a greater understanding of the team's needs. The lesson he took from the defeat to the Magic wasn't just that the team needed him, it was that the team needed to play as one. Jordan was ready to lead again, but this time, he knew that leadership meant more than just scoring points. It meant making sure his teammates were involved, it meant trusting them in the clutch, and it meant creating an environment where everyone could thrive. By the time the 1995-96 season began, the Bulls were a completely different team. The players had gelled, and the addition of key pieces like Steve Kerr and Ron Harper gave the team depth. The offense flowed more smoothly, and the defense, led by Jordan and Pippen, was suffocating. Jordan, now fully back in form, led the Bulls to a 72-10 record, the best in NBA history at the time. The team was dominant, and it was clear that Jordan's return had reignited their championship aspirations. The 1995-96 NBA Finals saw the Bulls face the Seattle Supersonics, who were a formidable team in their own right. But with Jordan fully back in control, the Bulls cruised to a 4-2 victory. Jordan was named Finals MVP once again, proving that his return had not only revived the team but had elevated them to heights they had not reached since his departure. The 1995-96 season was a defining one in Jordan's career. His return had proven that he was still the best in the world, and he had led the Bulls back to the championship. It was a moment of personal redemption, showing that despite his time away from the game, he had come back stronger than ever. His determination, leadership, and unrelenting will to win were as strong as ever, and the world saw once again why Michael Jordan was the greatest player to ever play the game. The 1995-96 season wasn't just a comeback, it was a statement that Jordan's legacy was far from over. The 1995-96 NBA season had been a monumental one for Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. After returning to the NBA the previous year, Jordan's game was back in full force, and his leadership had transformed the Bulls into the most dominant team in the league. The 72-10 regular season record was a testament to the team's cohesion, depth, and unyielding focus on their goal, to win another championship. Jordan, having already led the Bulls to 3 titles, was now on the verge of his 4th, and he was more determined than ever to prove that the Bulls' success was no fluke. In the regular season, Jordan averaged 30.4 points per game, but it wasn't just his scoring that made him a force, it was his leadership on both sides of the ball. Jordan's intensity and relentless drive permeated every aspect of the Bulls' game. He had evolved from just an incredible individual scorer into a complete player, one who could dominate on offense, lock down opponents on defense, and lead by example both on and off the court. His work ethic was legendary, and it inspired his teammates to elevate their own games. The postseason, however, would prove to be the true test. The Chicago Bulls, now fully cohesive, entered the playoffs with a target on their backs. Every team they faced would see them as the team to beat. But for Jordan and the Bulls, the mission was clear: to prove that they were the best and to reclaim their spot at the top of the NBA mountain. The first round of the 1996 playoffs saw the Bulls square off against the Miami Heat. The Heat were no pushovers, boasting a roster that included Alonzo Mourning and Glenn Rice, but they had little chance against the Bulls. With Jordan and Pippen leading the charge, the Bulls made quick work of the Heat, sweeping them 3-0. The Bulls were off to the next round, and it was clear that their championship aspirations were within reach. The Eastern Conference semifinals presented a stiffer challenge. The New York Knicks, who had always been a tough, defensive-minded team, posed a significant obstacle to the Bulls' playoff journey. Led by the fiery Patrick Ewing and coached by Jeff Van Gundy, the Knicks were a team that could match the Bulls' physicality and tenacity. The series was expected to be a hard-fought battle, and it didn't disappoint. The Bulls and Knicks went toe-to-toe, with each game filled with intense defense and emotional plays. But as the series wore on, it became evident that the Bulls had too much firepower. Jordan, once again, rose to the occasion, putting up stellar performances and leading the Bulls to a 4-1 series victory. His leadership on the court was unrivaled, and as the Bulls advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals, they knew they had been tested, but their real challenge was still ahead. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced the Orlando Magic, a team that had captured the imagination of the NBA with their young duo of Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. The Magic had been on a tear throughout the regular season and were seen as one of the few teams capable of challenging the Bulls for supremacy in the East. They had even beaten the Bulls earlier in the season, and the Bulls knew this would be no easy task. But Chicago's resolve was unwavering, and their defense, bolstered by Jordan's leadership, was too much for the Magic. The series was over quickly, with the Bulls sweeping the Magic 4-0. Jordan's performance in the series was vintage, with his offensive and defensive contributions proving too much for Orlando to handle. The Bulls were now headed to the NBA Finals, and Jordan was once again on the cusp of greatness. The stage was set for a showdown with the Seattle Supersonics, who had emerged as the best team in the Western Conference. The 1996 NBA Finals pitted the Bulls against the Supersonics, led by Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp, and Hersey Hawkins. The Sonics had a solid roster and had made it through a tough Western Conference, but they were facing the most complete team in the league. The finals began with the Bulls taking a 3-0 series lead, but the Sonics weren't ready to give up without a fight. They won Game 4, but the Bulls bounced back in Game 5, closing out the series with a dominant performance and securing their 4th NBA championship. The final series of the 1996 NBA Finals was a culmination of everything the Bulls had worked for since Jordan's return. Jordan was named Finals MVP for the fourth time in his career, adding yet another feather in his cap. He had not only proven that he could still dominate the league, but he had also led his team to a championship despite the odds and the pressure that came with it. The 1996 title was significant for Jordan and the Bulls for several reasons. It was a return to glory after Jordan's brief retirement. It was a confirmation that the Bulls were not just a team that had been successful during Jordan's first run, they were still capable of winning championships without skipping a beat. But perhaps most importantly, it was the beginning of a new chapter for Jordan, where he would no longer be just a player seeking to prove his individual greatness. Instead, he had become the leader of a dynasty, and the Bulls were primed to be the dominant force in the NBA for the foreseeable future. But as the confetti fell after the final buzzer of Game 5, Jordan was already thinking about the next challenge. He wasn't one to rest on his laurels. His competitive fire burned brighter than ever, and while the team was still celebrating, he was looking toward the next season, determined to keep the momentum going. He knew that in order to remain at the top, they would have to continue evolving as a team. The competition in the NBA was fierce, and every title had to be earned. For Jordan, winning the 1996 championship wasn't just about validating his return to the league, it was about continuing to prove that he was the best, that he could not only dominate but lead his team to the top year after year. Jordan's performance in the 1996 NBA Finals wasn't just another victory on his resume, it was a reminder that even in the face of challenges and adversity, Michael Jordan was still the king of the basketball court. With his leadership, the Chicago Bulls were able to reassert themselves as the league's premier team, and they would go on to win 2 more championships in 1997 and 1998, cementing their place in NBA history. The success of the 1996 Chicago Bulls was a testament to the power of leadership, teamwork, and resilience. Michael Jordan had taken a brief step away from the game, but upon his return, he was more determined than ever to lead his team to greatness. The 1996 season marked the beginning of a new dynasty for the Bulls and proved that Jordan's greatness wasn't limited to individual accomplishments. It was about winning championships and leading his team to the top of the NBA. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, and Jordan's hunger for success would continue to drive him toward even greater achievements. After winning 3 NBA championships in the 1990s, the Chicago Bulls were not only the team to beat, but they had also proven their dominance in the NBA. With Michael Jordan at the helm, they had become an unstoppable force in the league. However, after the 1996 NBA Finals victory, it was clear that maintaining this level of dominance was not going to be easy. In fact, the 1997 and 1998 seasons would test the Bulls' resolve like never before, and Jordan would once again find himself in a battle, this time for his legacy. Coming off the championship run in 1996, the Bulls faced several hurdles in 1997. First, there were external challenges. The NBA had become more competitive. Teams like the Utah Jazz, led by Karl Malone and John Stockton, had emerged as serious contenders. In addition, the Bulls were not the only team that had learned from their previous seasons. The teams in the league were getting better, more refined, and more focused on dethroning the champions. With the Bulls' success came the target on their backs, and everyone was gunning for them. Internally, there was growing tension as well. The 1997 season was marked by whispers about the future. While Jordan remained a dominant figure on the court, the team's front office, particularly general manager Jerry Krause, began to indicate that the 1997-98 season would be the final year of the Bulls' current iteration. Krause had already made it clear that he would not renew head coach Phil Jackson's contract after the season, and rumors swirled that Jordan himself might retire once again. Despite these tensions, the 1997 season became another step in the Bulls' quest for an unparalleled dynasty. Their desire for another championship was still alive, even if the team was fractured in some areas. As the season unfolded, Jordan found himself in an unfamiliar position. Not only was he still performing at an incredibly high level, but he was also tasked with managing the psychological pressure of possibly playing his final season with the Bulls. Yet, this sense of finality didn't seem to faze Jordan at all. If anything, it galvanized him. He played with an intensity that surpassed anything fans had seen before, even in his early days. His commitment to his teammates remained unshaken, and his leadership in both practice and games remained unmatched. By the time the 1997 NBA Finals rolled around, the Bulls found themselves facing the Utah Jazz. The Jazz, led by the pair of Karl Malone and John Stockton, had a remarkable regular season record and had been a dominant team in the West for years. This was a team built to take down the Bulls, with their star players and a style of play that could counter the Bulls' defense and speed. In short, the 1997 Finals were shaping up to be a true test of the Bulls' dynasty and Jordan's ability to continue leading a championship-caliber team. Game 1 of the Finals was close, and it set the tone for what would be a very physical series. While Jordan had the ability to score, the Jazz kept him on his toes. Malone, one of the most dominant power forwards in NBA history, challenged the Bulls on both ends of the floor. Stockton, with his brilliant passing and understanding of the game, tested the Bulls' defense at every opportunity. Jordan responded, however, with his characteristic poise and skill, and he led the Bulls to a hard-fought victory. As the series moved forward, Jordan continued to perform at an elite level. His ability to step up in crucial moments of the game was remarkable. The Jazz, for all their talent, found it difficult to contain Jordan in the clutch. As the series shifted to Utah for Games 3 and 4, the Jazz came out with determination, trying to claim the upper hand. But in Game 5, Jordan made a statement that would be forever etched in NBA lore. It was Game 5 of the Finals, a pivotal moment in the series. With the Bulls up 3-1, the Jazz were desperate to keep their hopes alive. In a game that saw Jordan battling through extreme fatigue and illness, he gave the performance that would come to be known as the flu game. Jordan, visibly sick and weak, fought through a combination of fever and exhaustion to play a game for the ages. Despite being unable to fully function at his best, Jordan scored an incredible 38 points, leading the Bulls to a victory over the Jazz and putting them one win away from their 5th championship. The flu game wasn't just about Jordan's scoring, it was about his resilience, determination, and willpower. That night, he embodied what it meant to be a champion, showing his teammates and the world that no obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seemed, could stop him from achieving greatness. It was a testament to his leadership and his drive to win at all costs. Jordan had become the definition of determination and heart in the basketball world, and this game only solidified his place as one of the greatest competitors in sports history. In Game 6, the Bulls were able to close out the Jazz to capture their 5th NBA championship, securing the 4-2 series win. Jordan's performance in the Finals was nothing short of spectacular, and he was once again named Finals MVP. The Bulls had proven that their dynasty was far from over, and Jordan had led them through yet another championship run, proving that his greatness wasn't bound by time or age. But more than just securing another title, Jordan's performance throughout the 1997 Finals showcased his ability to carry his team when they needed it the most. For Jordan, this championship was a reminder of the fire that burned within him, but it also raised the question of what was next. At this point, Jordan had achieved everything a player could possibly dream of. He had won 5 championships, earned 5 MVPs, been selected to numerous All-Star games, and transformed the way basketball was played. But despite all of his accomplishments, Jordan knew that the window for playing with the Bulls, or perhaps in the NBA at all, was closing. The speculation about his retirement grew, especially as the 1998 season began to loom. Despite his personal and professional success, the question remained, could he keep the dynasty alive? Could he lead the Bulls to one more championship before calling it a career? With the 1997-98 season underway, it was clear that Jordan was motivated by more than just winning. He was motivated by the desire to prove that the Bulls could win one final championship. But it wasn't going to be easy. The league was changing, and the tension between Jordan and the front office, particularly with Jerry Krause, who was determined to dismantle the Bulls roster regardless of the results, threatened to pull apart the dynasty. This was to be the final season for the core group of players that had built the Bulls' championship legacy, and everyone knew that the 1998 playoffs would be a test of both skill and spirit. Jordan's leadership, despite the off-court drama, kept the Bulls focused. With each passing game, it was clear that the 1998 season was going to be a testament to the power of Jordan's will and the resilience of a team determined to end their run on top. The final year would be filled with highs and lows, and Jordan would face one last challenge, a challenge to secure his sixth and final championship with the Bulls, the crowning achievement of his career. But before the team could secure that final championship, Jordan would have to face the mental and physical toll of what would be his last playoff run. Would the Bulls dynasty stand the test of time? Would Michael Jordan finally leave the game for good, or would his relentless drive propel him and the Bulls to one last victory? The 1997-98 NBA season was undeniably one of the most challenging, yet rewarding years in Michael Jordan's illustrious career. The tension surrounding the Chicago Bulls during this final season of their dynasty was palpable. The question on everyone's mind was whether this team, an NBA juggernaut for most of the 1990s, could capture one last championship under the leadership of Michael Jordan. The tension within the Bulls' locker room was thick, with rumors swirling that this would be the last season for the team as it was constructed. Coach Phil Jackson's contract was not going to be renewed, and despite their success, Jordan and Scottie Pippen faced an uncertain future. General Manager Jerry Krause had made it clear that the Bulls' dynasty would end after the season, regardless of the outcome. For Jordan, this provided a unique opportunity to leave the game on his own terms. For a player like Jordan, who had faced constant scrutiny, pressure, and challenges throughout his career, the final season was an opportunity to reaffirm his place in history. Despite the external distractions, Jordan remained laser-focused on the court. He was as sharp as ever. At 35 years old, he was still the best player in the world. His scoring remained elite, his defense relentless, and his leadership unwavering. The Bulls stormed through the regular season with a 62-20 record, securing the top seed in the Eastern Conference. Yet, it was clear that every game, every moment, was building toward one final, defining run. In the first round of the 1998 playoffs, the Bulls faced the New Jersey Nets. It was a matchup that was expected to be an easy sweep for Chicago, but the Nets surprised the Bulls with some spirited play. Jordan, however, was resolute and led the team through the series, helping them to a 4-0 victory. Each game served as a reminder of why Jordan had always been the heart and soul of the team. Even as his physical prowess began to fade, his mental fortitude remained a significant factor in the Bulls' success. In the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Bulls faced a familiar foe, the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets had a solid team, led by the veteran presence of Alonzo Mourning and the sharp shooting of Glenn Rice, but they were no match for Jordan's playoff mentality. The Bulls closed out the Hornets 4-1, with Jordan continuing his clutch performances, proving once again that when the pressure was on, there was no one better. But despite the victories, the season weighed heavily on Jordan. He knew that this was likely his last opportunity to bring another championship to Chicago. As the Bulls advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals, they would meet their biggest challenge yet, the Indiana Pacers, a team led by the enigmatic Reggie Miller. The Pacers were a resilient, gritty team with a solid defensive game plan that was designed to take advantage of any weakness. Miller, one of the best shooters in NBA history, was a constant threat, and the Pacers' physical style of play tested the Bulls at every turn. The series stretched to 7 games, and it was evident that Jordan was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. But every time the Pacers pushed the Bulls to the edge, Jordan responded. In Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Jordan once again took the reins. With the game on the line, he did what he had done so many times before: he took control. Scoring 28 points and playing impeccable defense, Jordan guided the Bulls to an 88-83 victory, securing their spot in the NBA Finals. It was a gut-wrenching series that tested Jordan's resolve, but it also proved that he was still capable of leading his team through adversity, even at the tail end of his career. The 1998 NBA Finals would be the last chapter of the Bulls' historic run, and the challenge this time was the Utah Jazz. The Jazz were a formidable team, led by the legendary duo of Karl Malone and John Stockton. The team had made it to the finals in 1997, but they had fallen short to the Bulls. In 1998, the Jazz were even more determined to dethrone Chicago, and the series promised to be an epic battle. Game 1 of the finals set the tone for the series. Jordan's incredible performances, including clutch shots in the final moments of games, showcased his still immense impact on the game. But the Jazz were no slouches. Malone's dominant post play and Stockton's sharp passing kept the series close, and with each passing game, the pressure mounted on both sides. The stakes were high, and everyone understood that this could be Michael Jordan's final playoff run. In Game 6, with the Bulls leading the series 3-2, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The Bulls were fighting for their 6th championship in 8 years, and Jordan was once again proving that he was a player who thrived under pressure. With the game tied at 86, and just under a minute remaining, Jordan drove down the court, determined to create a moment that would solidify his legacy. He sized up his defender, Brian Russell, and hit a jump shot from the top of the key with 5.2 seconds remaining. The ball sailed through the air, hit the back rim, and dropped in. The Chicago Bulls were up by 2 points, and the shot, now known as the last shot, would go down as one of the most iconic moments in basketball history. The Jazz had one final chance to tie the game, but the Bulls' defense held firm. With Jordan's last clutch basket, the Bulls sealed the win 87-86, claiming their 6th NBA championship. Jordan was named Finals MVP once again, marking his 6th and final championship and solidifying his legacy as the greatest player to ever play the game. In the locker room after the win, there was a bittersweet feeling. For Jordan, the win was the culmination of a remarkable career, but it was also the end of an era. He had proved everything he needed to prove and had led the Bulls to the top of the NBA one last time. As he sat in the locker room, reflecting on the journey, there was a sense of finality to it all. This was the end of the Bulls dynasty, and it was likely the end of Michael Jordan's career. Later, Jordan made the difficult decision to retire again, leaving the game for a second time. The 1998 championship would be his last, and it brought an emotional conclusion to one of the greatest basketball careers in history. His influence on the sport was undeniable, and his legacy would go on to inspire generations of players. Jordan's second retirement marked the end of an incredible chapter for the Bulls, but it was also a testament to the power of resilience, leadership, and greatness. Over the course of his career, Jordan had faced every challenge imaginable, from personal loss to on-court adversity, yet he had always managed to rise above. His ability to consistently perform under pressure, his unmatched competitive fire, and his unwavering commitment to his team made him the greatest player the world had ever seen. Years later, when people look back at the NBA, Michael Jordan's name will always be synonymous with greatness. His 6 championships, 5 MVPs, and countless unforgettable moments on the court are a part of basketball history. But what truly set Jordan apart was his mindset, the drive to be the best, no matter the cost. He wasn't just a player who could win, he was a player who would make those around him better, who would rise when the moment was biggest, and who would leave a lasting legacy that transcended the game of basketball. Michael Jordan's story ended where it began, on top. He left the game of basketball with the world watching, his legacy cemented, and the Bulls dynasty complete.